it is deafening in here.
Quand t'as déjà tout le temps oublié mes commandements, tout le temps. T'as déjà do it now. Je suis gaffe maintenant. Go.
Carlos Condit says, I can go into a dark place when I fight in the octagon. A man possessed to knock off one of the greatest champions of all time tonight, George St-Pьер.
Step back, please. Thank you.
Welterweight title on the line.
Are you ready, Mr. Condit? You ready? Fight!
Here we go! Tonight's clock brought to you by Hitman Absolution. Available November 20th. Black trunks for GSP. Red and white trunks for Condit. The right knee was the one that took the ACL damage. An injury that has finished careers in the past. Pushing forward early, George St-Pьер. Condit loves to throw hands followed by a kick and then spin out of trouble like he did against Nick Diaz. George Swiss ditch stance for a moment there.
Yeah, he did, and that opens him up for that elliptical kick, which Carlos loves.
And George looks absolutely huge for this fight. This might be the biggest we've seen him, Joe.
Yeah, his legs especially. He's done
it looks like an NFL running back.
Yeah, a lot of strength and conditioning, which, by the way, before he was injured, he said he didn't do.
Well, I mentioned it earlier, Joe, and you wonder if we might not see the greatest George St-Pьер ever to be able to have the time away. Although off a bad injury, he has really worked diligently to make himself even more powerful.
Well, one of the things that we said, it's the most difficult thing to do is to maintain the highest levels, to maintain that focus and intensity. And sometimes when you step away, you can become refreshed. Carlos just landed a nice jab there, Mike.
He said that he might have lost a little fire, and this helped get him back. He looks for the first takedown of the night.
George is shooting,
and he's got it
down. He's got to be careful. Mission control here. Condit does not have the right arm trapped, though. As he goes for mission control here, he's really just kind of biding his time. He needs to control that right arm of George's in the form of an overhook before he really can effectively attack with that position.
Condit has not been submitted since 2006.
Armbar attempt by Condit, rolled out of it is George. But George has to be careful here because Carlos will attack.
George has not been defeated since 2007.
Carlos
the upset
spinning
by Matt Serra.
Spinning towards his left. George is trying to pass now. Now he's in half guard.
He's halfway there, Joe.
Carlos has already shown that he's dangerous off his back bike. He regains guard. And George is trying to rough him up from the top here.
Condit does a nice job getting back to guard.
Yes, he does, but he's pulling on the head. And as George pulls on the head, it's called a can opener. It's a way to open up a guy's guard, but it opens you up for arm bars. As you commit to pulling on that head, if a guy's really nasty off his back, he can catch an arm bar from that position.
I like one of the pre-fight quotes going into this championship matchup. How do you rebuild the perfect fighting machine? It started with 5 months of rehab in Southern California as St-Pьер turns it up early. Where there was, George admitted, a dark time where he thought it might be over. But he persevered, and he's here tonight in top position.
See how he's pulling on that head there?
Yep.
Now this can open him up to an armbar, but there's a very small window. See it right there? The small window, man. And Carlos is going high with those legs. Remember how quickly Vitor Belfort snatched that armbar on John Jones. That's how quick it can happen.
Good pace by St-Pьер.
And don't think Carlos didn't know he was going to be in this position. I'm sure he's well prepared for this. And as George keeps reaching for that can opener.
Takes a look at the clock. Under a minute on the clock here in the first round. GSP 22-2. Overall 16-2 in the UFC. Looking to move to 10-2 in championship fights. Big right hand.
Good shots being landed by George.
He's being bullied here by George as he embraces the grind of this wrestling that is surpassed by no one in UFC history. To the body. Again, he looks at the clock. 15. Nice elbow.
Again, spinning for that armbar, and George counters.
Final seconds of the round.
Condi back to his feet. Cut, though.
Big round for the champion.
Condi's cut bad, Mike. Let's see, and it's right at the end.
Boom.
That's it. That's the one that did it. You immediately see it open up. One more look here. Right there, and right away you see the blood flow.
Good on Khalzov.
Condi on a 5-fight win streak.
Fight!
Keep an eye on the cut. There's that punch-punch kick combination that Condit loves.
Nothing there, though.
Nope.
Great defense by George. Nice jab by George.
George a sensational striker as well. In fact, that is his base, is that full contact karate.
Easily moves away from those shots again.
Just amazed how big St-Pьer is right now.
He clipped him with the right hand there. George goes for the head kick.
Jab was so effective against Josh Koscheck.
Good right hand by George. You know what? Carlos is hesitating here, Mike. You see him thinking about pulling the trigger, and he doesn't. And then George does.
Well, you had said before he didn't mind being on his back. That's before he took an elbow over the right eye.
Well, you know, there's levels to everything. You can be confident off your back with certain people, and then you get a guy like George on top of you.
Man, he's headhunting too. The chant of GSP.
Carlos needs to gain George's respect, and backing up and employing the same strategy that he did in the Diaz fight is not going to get that.
George
Nice
said
stiff
many
jab.
years ago, Joe, he wants to be the man that brought MMA to a different level.
Good combo there by Carlos, though. Nice jab. Now he's opening up. This is what he's got to do. He's got to back George up a bit, and when he does, George is probably going to try to take him down. Nice shot to the body by Carlos. Now he's opening up.
Oh!
Beautiful timing with that right hand.
Up on his toes. Good movement by St-Pьer. Condit trying to steal this round back.
Condit's bleeding from the nose now as well.
That was that right hand counter a moment ago. Midway point of round 2. Fight scheduled for 5 5-minute rounds.
One of the aspects of George St-Pierre's game that's lost on some people is the fact that because he's so good at wrestling, it makes everyone hesitate before they throw shots. And you're seeing that with Carlos. After being taken down that first round, he hesitates because he's worried about this. And immediately George passes into half guard and a hard elbow to the same cut. And it's opened up even more now. Now it's nasty.
St-Pьer holds wins over UFC champions Matt Serra, Matt Hughes twice, BJ Penn twice, and Sean Shirk. He's trying to take out the interim champion here tonight. And a big left hand.
He's got to be careful here, though. He's rolling. Carlos is rolling on that leg. He's got to sprawl.
Powering through it, St-Pьer. Carlos.
Man, look at all the blood on the canvas, Mike. This is getting to be a mess. That cut's horrible.
And it's going to make both men slippery. Make it extremely difficult for someone to finish this fight with a submission.
Well, not necessarily. It makes it easier with chokes.
With chokes, yes.
Big
if he can hold on,
there.
right?
Yeah. If you can get the back, sometimes it helps when a guy's bloody.
How about from the top, Joe?
No, not from the top. No, it's not going to help George. The only way it's going to help is if he gets his back. But if he does get his back,
slide under, right?
you can slide the arm under sometimes when the guy's protecting the chin. But it does make it more difficult for triangles and things along those lines.
And this is looking like Kenny Flurry and Sean Shirk.
There he goes with elbows here. Elbows here from the bottom by Coндит. And he's got to do more of those. He's got to get George's respect from the bottom here. And he can do that from the bottom. He's got a nice long reach. And he's very good at elbowing off of his back. And if he can cut George from this position and do some damage, he can sort of change the course of this fight.
Condit's up, but he eats a punch. Since late 2009, when Carlos joined Mike Winkeljohn full-time, he is undefeated. What a start to our main event.
And there's a brilliant right hand over the shoulder by George. And there's another one, catching Carlos coming in. And here's the double leg, catches that kick, drives, gets to half guard, and opens that cut up even more.
Round 3. Sold out Bell Center in the hometown of GSP from the south shore of Montreal, St. Isidore. But Coндит from the bottom was able to cut St-Pьер.
Nice inside leg kick by George.
Spin.
Telegraphed.
Coндit.
That's a nice leg kick!
Oh, he got
George is hurt!
Coндit with a big kick to the head! Coндit swarming St-Pьер!
George is in big trouble!
Coндit on top! The big head kick! Now to the body!
George is swollen up, Mike, badly. Carlos is going to get his back. George is trying to get back up to his feet.
And you talked about being slippery, Joe.
Full guard now. And now it's Carlos's turn.
Look at the swelling on the forehead of St-Pьер.
Big elbows by Carlos Coндит. George is trying to move here, Mike.
The shin to the forehead from Coндit and another elbow. George is rocked. He's out though. We got ourselves a fight, ladies and gentlemen. How good is this? We're all back to even now, Joe.
That might be more than even. I think he hurt George a lot more than George hurt him.
Big right hand by St-Pьer.
George
picks him up, throws him down. St-Pьer 3 for 3 on his takedowns. He's landed 1 in each round.
Carlos is trying to secure Kimura, going for the high guard here.
That's the hardest George St-Pьer has been hit since Matt Serra finished him many years ago.
Well, we don't know how badly he's hurt and what happens when he goes in between rounds. Carlos is rolling for the armbar here. There's still plenty of time in this round. This round's half over.
And we have the championship rounds ahead.
There's a big swelling over the right eye of George where that kick landed. And Carlos is targeting it now with punches. Carlos is going with the body triangle now from the guard, which it limits your offense substantially, but it allows you to squeeze down on the guy's body, makes it hard for him to breathe, and he's not attacking with jiu-jitsu from his back anyway. He's like trying to hit with elbows and punches from the bottom.
St-Pьer, only the second Canadian to hold a UFC belt, the other being Carlos Newton in this same division. The Ronin. St-Pьer seems to have recovered here, Joe, and he's using his strength advantage again.
You know, it's hard to tell because they're on the ground. When you see how a guy moves standing up, it's a kind of a different thing when he's got to use his balance.
Condi trying to get up.
Back up to his feet. George has got his hands locked, though. Carlos is going for a ride. But Carlos is reaching down for the Kimura, so George has to be careful about that.
George looking for the high crotch.
See how Carlos has that locked up, Mike? And so because of that, that's keeping George from attacking. And George breaks it free and gets him down. You know, how do you score this round? Because George is on top pounding him, but I think Carlos did the most damage.
Well, the only times GSP has been defeated in his career, they were both first round stoppages. And George St-Pьer is 9-0 in fights that go the distance.
Turning for that, look at that, he almost sweeped him. Turning for that arm bar.
Serra and Hughes with 1 second left in the round back in 2004.
George steps over and now he's in half guard again, Mike.
In what George called the most important fight of his life.
He's in half guard here and he's triangling the leg. And see how he's doing that, Mike? That keeps Carlos from sneaking that leg out and going to full guard. He's trying hard.
He had GSP in trouble early.
You know, how do you score this round? It's a very interesting round.
Control for GSP,
but
big shot for Condi. We are headed to the championship rounds.
He came up from, look at this, brilliant job by Carlos Condit. And George was legitimately staggered there. That was a big kick. And they never got ice on that swelling, Mike. They should have got an end swell on that right away. Because if that gets bigger and he drops down by the eye, that could really interfere with his vision.
And you see the bruise on the forehead. A hematoma coming on the right side of the forehead. 2 kicks thrown early by Condit. Round 4.
Condit can look at that and see his handiwork.
Switches his stance to southpaw. George landed 1 takedown in the first round, and again he got it.
Yep. That one snuck through again.
1 in the second and 2 in the third.
And George just lands one of his own.
Anderson Silva watching this fight very closely with Lyoto Machida. Both men earned UFC belts in 2006, but George lost his first defense against Serra. Anderson with 10 total defenses.
George got him on the ground again, turning the corner. Side control.
George looking for a 7th, Joe.
George's got to keep that right hip out. Yeah. Immediately, Carlos snuck that hip in and got the right knee into play, and now he's in half guard. George had that opportunity to stay in side control there. He lost it. George doesn't mind being on top in half guard, though. In fact, Randy Couture preferred being in half guard for ground and pound because of the fact that you can hold on to the guy's leg and keep him in position. For grappling, you know, for straight submissions, it's not a good position, but for control and ground and pound, it is.
Condit is no stranger to 5-round fights. He had the one recently with Nick Diaz, but he was scheduled for 5 5-minute rounds 5 times in the WEC. Never had to go the distance in those.
Good shots from the bottom by Carlos Condit here. I like how he's attacking from the bottom. He's making George work here. These are good shots. He's going under, he's going over, elbows, punches, constantly attacking, keeping 1 foot on the hip too, Mike. And George tried to step over that, which he did. But Carlos will push down that knee and slide his right leg up and back, or left leg rather, up and back into play.
Condit said, GSP is the champ until I beat him. I am the placeholder. Huge advantage in top position for GSP.
This is the championship rounds of a grueling fight so far. George steps over again.
Carlos doing an amazing job, Joe. Every time GSP gets a half guard, he gets those hips back underneath and closes his full guard.
His guard's excellent. Now he goes mission control. Now this is good because he's got that arm pinned down. He lost the position, trying to hold the arm. And George smartly turns away from it.
Uh-oh. Looking for the knee bar.
He's looking to hold on to that leg. George has got all his weight down on it, though. It's okay right now.
It's the left knee, not the right knee.
Triangle attempt here. George's got a posture up here.
And he's out.
And
there's where being slippery comes into play.
Certainly.
Under 2 on the clock in the 4th.
Also being trained well, so he understands what not to do in that situation.
Supernatural talent and athleticism helps, right?
That all helps. And being gorilla strong.
Yeah, the Spider. Wonder what he's thinking with George being so big in this fight. The greatest of all time, Anderson Silva.
Carlos gets back to his feet. But George has his hands locked.
And that cut over the right eye of Condit, Joe.
Reversal by Condit.
Is open again, and the blood going into the eyes of Condit, knee on belly.
Brilliant reversal by Condit. Oh, George almost reversed him, but he got stuck against the cage.
Right back down.
You know, the wrestling of George St-Pьер is just so sensational. It saves him in so many spots.
5 for 5 with his takedown.
He's just able to out-grapple guys consistently. And Carlos is attacking that Kimura again, but he can't hold on to it.
Joe, we had said it earlier, when the stars align and you get a matchup like this, we are truly blessed, and what a matchup it has been.
It is everything we thought it was going to be.
And more so. Final 30 seconds of the 4th round.
And it's really being decided so far by George's grappling. Although the most exciting moment came from Carlos' striking. Carlos again with feet on the hips.
Final seconds of the round.
Again, back to his feet.
He's a worldly man. 7 successful defenses at 170 for Hughes. St-Pьер looking for his 7th tonight, which would be 7 in a row. Matt Hughes, 9-3 in championship fights. George St-Pьer, 9-2 going into this battle. So if you want to truly claim that you are the greatest welterweight champion in UFC history, you can do so tonight by going 10-2 in championship fights and surpassing Hughes, the Hall of Famer.
Beautiful combination there by GSP. The left hook with the right leg kick. Now Carlos is opening up.
Winkle John, the world champion kickboxer, said you have got to leave it all in there and finish him here. Sure, he feels they are down 3-1.
Oh, nice spinning back kick by Condit. Didn't get full extension on it.
You got to talk about, Joe, our cut men that are working both corners. Both of these guys bloodied up, but neither dripping right now. A great job done. Looking for another one. He got it.
George,
6 for 6.
Carlos has a switch on him though, Mike. See that right hand deep in? He lost it. George keeps on that leg. Carlos is free and side kicks him away. Excellent defensive side kick.
This is the most punishment St-Pьer has taken in a long time.
He tagged him with that right hand.
Looking for that Anderson Silva kick, the Lyoto Machida kick. The Spider watching very closely.
Good right hand by Carlos. Nice straight left by Carlos.
Just over 3 minutes remain in our main event of the evening. First fight in nearly 19 months for St-Pьer.
Again, he goes high with that kick.
That one off the arms. Nice left hand. St-Pьer 6 for 6 in his takedowns tonight. Looking for the uppercut. Past the midway point of the 5th and final round. St-Pьer 9-0 in fights that go the distance. Stiff jab. Double jab, followed up by a big right hand. St-Pьer looking for the finish still.
Takes him down again, he's in full mount. Nope, Carlos sneaks the legs up. And George steps over, half guard. Gets a head and arm here. Let's see if he can get that leg free and mount.
Carlos got his back off the cage, Joe, but he may remain on his back for the rest of this fight if St-Pьer has his way, trying to solidify the victory.
Carlos got the left hand on the hip, and he's trying to sneak his left leg up. And George is pressing down on the shin, his right shin on the thigh, so I believe he's probably trying to free that leg up and perhaps move to mount.
Under 90 seconds remain.
Yeah, he's trying to mount. He's going to try to slide that leg out. Here it comes. Nope, Carlos gets it right back in.
But Carlos needs to get up and do something, Joe.
He certainly does.
7 for 7. For the man who has landed more takedowns efficiently than anyone in UFC history.
He got impatient there, Mike. He gave up his back.
Trying to slide out of trouble.
He rolls.
George is just
great roll.
He's like a huge magnet on him right now. Body.
Well, Carlos gave up his back there, and George wasn't able to capitalize. Carlos is just trying to make anything happen here.
He had to overcome the worst injury of his career and one of the most, if not the most difficult opponent, St-Pьer, working his way towards victory. They are on their feet, 20,000 plus, including the longtime middleweight champion Anderson Silva.
Carlos again trying for that Kimura on the left arm. He's got
10 seconds remain. Big elbows by the champion. And they go the distance. What a fight. What a fight. Takedown after takedown.
There's
and a big elbow.
Big cut in the first that really got things going for George. And there's a nice right hand by George. But this kick in the second round, which really, the third round, which really changed things. And that was about as hurt as we've seen George St-Pьer since he lost the title to Matt Serra.
Absolutely.
And Carlos was all over him, grounding and pounding him, but George again utilized his wrestling, turned the tide. And here again, the wrestling of George. Over and over and over again. There's a vicious elbow from the top. And then finally in the fifth in championships, look at that, beautiful flying jab, Superman jab, and a big right hand by George there.
Ladies and gentlemen, after 5 rounds, we go to the judges' scorecards for a decision. The judges score this contest 49-46, 50-45, and 50-45, declaring the winner by unanimous decision, Logano, and still the undisputed UFC welterweight champion of the world, George Rush St-Pьer.
The greatest welterweight champion in UFC history.